Yes, we're going to be going over a little bit of a sports story that's been popping up. It's been the fact that Colin Kaepernick and his lawyer want to sue the NFL, saying that there's some type of a blacklisting. And what we really need to do is actually look at Colin Kaepernick himself, his stats, and what it actually means for him overall in the actual thing. Now, let's first start out with his actual record. First of all, we have a record on him of 28-30. This shows that he has a losing record, number one. Number two is he completes 59.8% of his passes career-wise. This means he's completing under 60%, which is usually a threshold for what they want for a starting quarterback. Another concern, if we look up here, we're going to see that he is 31 years old. This is also showing that he's going to be on a downside, especially for someone, as we see down here. You're going to see that he is more of a running quarterback, as we only see up here that he has only reached the minimum threshold of 3,000 yards twice in his career. So when we see that he is mainly a running quarterback, we're going to see that this is a major problem, being that he is 31 years old. This is going to be a serious downside. So when he was spending a lot of his time protesting on the field, teams are going to be viewing this as a huge distraction. It is going to cause huge problems in the locker room, and they're not going to weigh this as a positive for their actual teams. It doesn't matter what way you feel on the kneeling issue, teams are going to view this as a negative for their actual team. Because some players are going to support it, some players are going to be against it, and that's going to cause a disruption in the locker room. And this is going to cause problems. What you want from a quarterback is you want them to lead the actual team, not cause some type of disruption. Now, when we actually look at what his numbers were, we see the fact is he's only had a 60% completion percentage 3 times, as well as a sub 60% 3 times. And the problem being is the 60%, that includes 1 year where he only had 5 passes. If you start to eliminate years where he had under 300 passes thrown, you are basically down to the 2013, 2014, and 2016 years. And we're talking basically is we only have 1 year of 60%, and the other 2 sit at sub 60%. This is a major problem for him. While he does have a relatively low interception percentage, it doesn't really help him that he is very, very prone to running the ball, as we see with the actual age, because it's going to essentially hurt him in the long run. And especially the way teams tend to guard against these running quarterbacks, it's going to impact, because we don't see as many running quarterbacks nowadays as we did a few years ago. The actual way the game is played has changed. It's actually going a lot more toward quarterbacks who are very, very reluctant to run and who like to actually sit in the pocket and only run when it's actually a last resort, and use it actually as a secondary skill. And that's why this is a big problem for him. When it comes to touchdowns, he's only hit 20 touchdowns once in his career. He's never hit 30 throwing touchdowns, and this is another problem. He's never hit 3,500 pass yards in a single year. This shows him as nowhere close to a passing threat. Yes, he's had a 90-plus rating twice, but one of which was a shortened season for him, and the other of which was a sub 60 rating, sub 60 completion percentage for him. when we're looking at, he's also not even throwing for that high yards as compared to some of his other uh, competition out there. And when we get new people coming into the league being drafted, this is basically a issue for him, because what's happening is we're not going to see that he's going to be uh, as highly wanted, because he's, number one, aging. Number two, we had the problem that he doesn't throw many touchdowns. We see 21 as his most, and that's only happened once. Most often, it's his second most is 19, so he can't even hit 20 touchdowns on back-to-back years. He doesn't throw many. He doesn't throw many actual passes. He relies heavily on the receivers to get the yardage, as we see his attempt yards per the attempt yards per attempt is 7.3, yet the yards per completion is 12.1 for his career. So we're showing that he's basically relying on the receivers to get all the yardage. So it's not exactly like he's one that can actually start picking apart a defense. And it's showing that basically the new quarterback rating system, it was showing that he started out high in his early parts at a 74.4, which I believe peaks out at 100. And he's gone down pretty much every year until he got to his last year, where he got to a 49.5, where it was up from the second to last year of 43.4. So it's showing he's actually getting worse. Sacks, he's always been prevalent to get great numbers of sacks, and this does not go down to the actual offensive line, but rather the actual reason that he wants to run all the time. And it's caused basically a huge number of loss of yardage, and this is a problem for their team. Whatever team would actually go after him, and teams do not want to be losing yardage on these sacks. They want to minimize them. This is why you don't want to go after a quarterback who's very, very open to running the ball, because he might make a huge mistake. And since he was basically set up to run this offense that they had out in Nevada, it's basically very, very limited. And when you get a guy who cannot run a very, very open offense and traditional offense, it's going to limit his actual ability to run as a quarterback. And nobody wants to bring in a quarterback who essentially is limited to what they can run. So it's not necessarily that they're actually don't want to sign him because of this uh, dropping a knee issue. It's he doesn't have the talent, as we've seen with the numbers. He doesn't have the ability to play in any other systems except for one really narrow system that he learned in Nevada that was actually implemented just for him out in San Francisco. And when it comes down to it, is that was actually minimal in output when we see the actual outcome of the actual numbers. So when you take him out of that system, we basically know that he can't handle it. And this is the whole issue. This is why when it came down to the draft, is we know that basically is we know that basically he was drafted in the second round. That was even a stretch pick as is for the 49ers, because he really couldn't even handle that. And he can try to sue all he wants, but you can't force teams to sign you, because it should be a free market for labor. Just like you can't force a company to actually hire you even though you don't have the actual credentials. This is not the way things work. You can't force them to hire you. You can't force them to make them provide service, and this is the way things go in a free market system. And you can't do any of these things with it. It needs to be fully based on voluntary cooperation between both sides. And it doesn't matter that he can state that, oh, I have a rating that's just below 90. Well, the fact is what did you do with that to earn that? Well, when we look at those numbers, is when they state that most of that was done by the receivers, it doesn't look so good. And when we see that basically is he was trying to avoid interceptions and being very, very safe in his attempts and passing under 10 yards, we see that it doesn't look that like he's really that much of a quarterback. He wasn't throwing these long passes. And that's why we see the touchdowns as quite low, because he wasn't really doing this. And that's why he was going toward actually running the ball. And we see running numbers from a second year of 415, third year 524, fourth year 639, fifth year 256, but that was shortened, and sixth year 468. It wasn't that he broke conduct, it's just that he couldn't match up. And even though he was technically producing a 90.7 rating in his last year, we see that his record was 1-10 before he ended up getting removed. And this was frankly the factor of what happened. He stunk. And when you cannot produce, this is what ends up happening. He ended up only producing one quality year within his whole career, which is the year right here that I've highlighted, 2013, where he was 243 for 416, 58.4%, which is a poor percentage. It's 31.97 for pass yards, 21 touchdowns, 5% for touchdown, 8 picks for 1.9%. He did get a 64-yard pass, 7.7 per attempt, 7.8 yards yards per attempt, and then 13.2 yards per completion, which led him to a 199.8 per yards per game and a 91.6 rating, and it produced a 65.7 quarterback rating in the new system, with only producing 39 sacks for 231 yards, with a negative yards of 6.52, sack percentage of 8.6. And then when we look at the yards during 2013 for running, we see he had 92 for 524 and 4 touchdowns. And when we look at that, we see that he's actually was actually his only decent year. We can look at his next year, which had better pass numbers, but the interception percentage did go up, and the touchdown percentage did definitely go down. But the numbers for yardage definitely went up. But your yards per attempt and yards per completion went down definitely. And this is why what we see with him is really he's not worthy of any type of signing, unless you'd sign him as maybe a backup, as he'd be listed as more like on the level of another backup. And that's the whole thing. He's maybe on the level of other backups historically, I mean, you might see the rating as being high, but when you start to break down the actual numbers, you see that he's very rarely taking shots deep because of the numbers we see at of how these numbers are coming about, and this is what we're seeing from him, and he's even having rough times completing those passes, and that should be a huge concern. We see the record, which is very, very poor, and we should basically view him as basically being essentially someone who is not really a high commodity in the NFL. Just when it comes to talent wise, then you start to add something such as age. Now you got a 31-year-old that's really stuck in one system. Uh, Talent was not that great, and now we're going to add in uh, something in which would be considered controversial into a where he needs to be playing as a leader, and he can't because he was really never shown as being a quality leader. And this is and they're suing based on that. Well, the fact is they're not going to have any case because this is not where the teams are ganging up and saying we don't want this guy. This is where basically this guy has no value. This guy's 31 years old. He has no leadership skills, which is key for quarterbacks, and he has no ability to actually play in the current system because he's only played in one system that came out of Nevada, which was a really, really downsized version of the spread offense. It was so downsized that it's basically so simplified that most quarterbacks in the NFL today could basically master it within like an hour, and he cannot play out of anything other than that. Uh, yes, they do play in the spread offense a lot in the NFL, but they go in the full spread offense, not this downsized thing that only works in the shotgun system. They actually work. He needs to learn how to work in other systems than this, and if he doesn't, or if he hasn't by now, he's going to basically find himself sitting at home. I mean, he could basically find himself sitting at home because of this, and instead of basically saying, "Oh, they don't want me because of this, that, the other, or there's a blacklist on me," it's that's not the reason why. It's because of you're making yourself basically unhireable because of talent, age, and your inability to lead, and then you have your actual stats that are proving it. And this is not trying to be mean. I'm talking this purely from a perspective of what a team would actually look at him when they see this sub 60 percentage for completion. They're going to be raising red flags. I mean, even if Eli Manning were a free agent right now, teams would be raising red flags because even his completion percentage is poor. And if he were out there looking for a job, he would have a hard time. But because he doesn't have these personal red flags, he would have a little bit of a better time finding a job, as opposed to Kaepernick, because he has both the age issue and the completion issue. But because when you start adding more and more red flags to your uh, whole package, you're going to basically have a problem getting signed. And that's what Kaepernick has. Kaepernick has a problem because he has so many red flags sitting on him, and nobody wants him because he can't complete passes. He's mainly a very, very rudimentary offensive player, and he only runs the ball. He's old, and he basically supports a system that's going to break apart a team. So that's what we have with him. Now, if you like this, like, subscribe, click the notification bell, share this everywhere you can, so that basically more people can subscribe to me. Check out my other videos. I know this is about sports. I'm going to be a little bit out of the norm for what most people are used to seeing from me, but my knowledge kind of goes a little bit in a lot of different directions. So, well, except for like fashion, it doesn't really go there with, but it goes in what I call a lot of different directions. So, as I said, like, subscribe, click the notification bell, share it everywhere. Make sure your friends, make sure everyone sees it, so we can get up to the monetization level, so I can get more people out there seeing this. Because as I am on SSI, so I want to get off that and be able to make a living. And I will see you guys later today. I don't know if this is going to be my only post, but I'll see what we can do. Bye.